Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. We're wrapping up the month of March. It's my favorite for many reasons, but really just because it's my birthday month. But with that being said, we're talking about discovering what is next. There's always seasons in life, seasons of recovery, healing, whatever you're going through. We got change on the cusp. We're never really static as individuals. Today we have a new guest, a friend, and a podcaster himself. Welcome, Ashero, to the podcast. I appreciate your thoughts and your insight on this topic.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I just want to give a disclaimer for those who are listening, watching. If you are in the States, find what avenues for appropriate, like professional help when it comes to crisis. 988 is the number in the United States, but wherever you are, I do not like reinventing the wheel, working in the mental health field. Find what works for you. So if you need support, ask it. One person said 3 words that are hardest to say is I need help. So if you need help, get it. I also say that people say it better than me. A book I read from Viktor Frankl, he says, when we no longer are able to change the situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. What comes to mind, Ashero, when you hear this quote?
So when I hear this quote, one of the first things that pops into my head is that the first thing that I grab from the quote is that there are going to be times where you can't control external influences. There are going to be certain things that happen that you don't control. That's the first thing that you have to come to grips with and to understand. And when you come into a situation like that, or when you're dealing with a situation like that, you have to be adaptable. You have to be able to look at the situation and make change. The way that worked for you yesterday may not be the way that works for you today, and that's okay. The part of being a human being is dealing with change and growing. When you grow, you have to change and adapt. You can take a look at like a caterpillar. A caterpillar can't stay a caterpillar all its life.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not going to fulfill its purpose. It has to form a chrysalis. It has to turn into a butterfly. So it has to go through this process of change. And so when you have a situation where things may be difficult or a little bit challenging, don't fret, don't worry about it. Just say, okay, how can I take this situation and how can I grow? And how can I use this situation to better myself and to learn more about myself?
Yeah, and one thing you mentioned is there's a lot of things that we can't change. And Viktor Frankl in the book, he does emulate the idea that the people who are listening, and I use Viktor Frankl a lot, but he was a psychiatrist during the Holocaust. He was there. He kind of observed what he saw, and the one thing he wrote was that the optimists usually didn't survive. It sounds funny. The optimists didn't survive because there's always that day. They're like, well, by next March, we'll be liberated or whatever it may be. But the discouragement gets worse when March passes, April passes. The other thing was the pessimists, or per se, wouldn't survive because they're just like, no, you gotta save your bread. We're all doomed. That kind of state of mind. The people he found did well was one thing I kept stressing, but I didn't point out this as much. One thing is they saw that there was another day. They felt. They don't know what that day was. They knew that there was something to look forward to. That's right. One. The other thing was they only changed what they could. They only changed what they could. So maybe today, speaking frankly, because people who are struggling out there, after COVID, a lot of people have lost. Let's just say they lost. Whether they lost some family member, or whether they lost just part of there's been a lot of change. So that in itself can be lost. So what Viktor Frankl was emulating was that change what you can. Maybe today is just get out of bed. Maybe it's just to go for a walk. Maybe it's just to talk to one person. Or like I said before, if you need help, maybe it's all you need to do is ask for help. That's it. So change can be adjustment, but I don't think it's an abandonment, to what you're trying to do. Because I like the idea, that we're all kind of unfinished.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like to say, I'm a gamer, so you got those 100% completion. And I try to stay away from doing that because it ruins the game in a weird way. Because at the sense of it, being human is being incomplete. Being kind of unfinished. I can get a milestone, but what's beyond that? We're not static. I have another quote for you, Ashero. It's from Vironika. I'm hoping, but I don't want to butcher the last name. Probably all this month, but Tugaleva. I apologize if that's not how you say it, but she says an interesting point that I really like, and it says, to know yourself, you must sacrifice the illusion that you already do. And I find it intriguing and can be very deep. What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
Oh, to me, this is all about growth.
Yeah.
You're the person you were yesterday is not who you are today, and it's not who you're going to be tomorrow. Every day you're growing, even if you don't realize it. The things that you experience, the things that you go through, they make an impact on you, whether it be consciously or subconsciously. And your response to it is growth. For you to say that you know yourself, you have to like, just like this quote says, you have to kind of put an asterisk near it, because you don't fully know yourself. You know who you are right now, but who you're going to be 5 years from now is going to be drastically different. I was reading one of my favorite people to listen to. He preaches and does different talks. His name is Ty Gibson, and just the other day he mentioned something on social media about how he had an idea or an opinion. There was an opinion that he held, and only recently did he change his opinion, which is that's fine. And a gentleman came up to him and said, "Hey, that opinion that you had, that was the right opinion. You shouldn't have changed your opinion." And he was very upset, like, "How dare you change your opinion?" And Tygus was like, "Oh, well, I did some more research on it. I thought more about it, and I changed my mind. And it was I feel great about the fact that I was able to change how I felt, change my opinion." And the guy was just so upset, like, how dare you change your opinion? But kind of like what you were mentioning, that's part of being human. That incompleteness, we're never going to be at a point on our own where we are perfect. And so understanding that and coming to grips with that helps you understand and realize that you have to continue to grow day by day. That may mean changing your opinions. That may mean, the way that you reacted yesterday, you need to grow and learn that you have to react a different way today. I think the beauty of it is, for me, I lean heavily on my faith. My faith teaches me that, I am incomplete, but I believe in a God that will complete me and will complete work in me. And so that I feel reassured with that. I'm incomplete, and that's okay. I don't need to try and complete myself on my own. I just need to grow, and God will take care of the rest.
Yeah, I really, when I came to the faith, and like I say to my podcast listeners, those who are, not everyone are faith-based, but this podcast is really outreach. And for my whole thing is that I do, my faith is a big part of why I do what I do. So just like you're mentioning, but I do encourage hope at the very basic level. And I think what you were saying, one thing that kind of helps me with at least what you're talking about with how you see God, and I felt for me was God was constant. It was reassuring for me. A lot of things. I came from I would say secular home. My father was faith-based, but I wasn't required to go because our family was split in that way. So for me, I saw things differently and I understood things differently. So when I actually took it upon myself to be like, what value does this faith per se, from in my context, has for me? Well, because so many things change, and as a young age, going through a lot of maybe traumatic or hard things, I thought that was reassuring more than anything else, that everyone was kind of all the other talking points, which maybe not, I wasn't there yet to actually get, if that makes sense, or actually appreciate at that time. So I get it. Now I'm now working in the mental health field. I love what I do, but at the same time, being someone who was actually more of a client at one point, you see things differently. Now I'm on the other side, and it's just you kind of, what I used to think changes, just like this person. Who I am changes. What's important to me changes, and how we communicate changes. Proverbs, and I use a verse in Proverbs 19:2. It says, "Desire without knowledge is not good. And whoever makes haste with his feet misses his way." There's a lot of urgency and like kind of enoughness. Kind of, we need to do this or we won't, and we see it inside and outside church. It doesn't miss anything. So it's not like a faith-based kind of. It's human. It's human to kind of be rushed into things. One thing I used to say, I don't know if you agree with me, Ashero, I don't like being sold anything. Like, I go somewhere, I just want to, I'll do my research, especially in the world we live in. It's not like this information is not obtainable by ourselves. Correct. So if I go to let's say, one thing people hate, I haven't purchased a new car yet, but let's say I went to a car dealership. It is what most people hate is the selling part. They don't want to be sold. They wish they could skip all that. And there's, and you got to ask, it can't just be the people selling it. It can be just part of the mechanism of it all. Sometimes it does feel overwhelming. Any thoughts of this Proverbs 19:2 that comes to mind to you, Ashero?
No, you hit the nail on the head. I was actually going to bring up the car sale. Yeah. So I'll give you my personal experience. So 2 years ago now, almost 2 years ago now, 2021, decided to go and get a new car. And so, I did my research, and I'm the kind of person that the bigger the purchase, the more research I'm doing. Yeah. And the longer I'm taking to research. And so, buying a brand new car is no cheap deal. And so I spent a lot of time, like I started researching in January and didn't actually go to a dealership till like April or May. Yeah. And so the first dealership I went to, walked to the dealership, I knew what I wanted. I don't need you to offer me this or offer me that. I want this color, these options. This is what I want. Do you have it? Yes or no? If you have it, how much are you selling it for? I'm cool with that price, or I'm not cool with that price. Like, this should be a 45 to an hour long transaction. I walk in and I say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Oh, we don't have that, but we've got this, or we've got this, or we've got this. Well, thank you, but I'm not interested in those things. I know what I want. I did all the research. I know what I want. Oh no, but you got to try it out. You got to test drive, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. I ended up spending maybe 3 hours in a dealership, trying to convince them that I know what I want. If you don't have it, I'm out of here. And they just kept trying and trying and trying. And eventually I got fed up. I was like, I'm out of here, and left. And I think our society as a whole is kind of built that way. Like, just do it now. Just, don't think about it. Don't consider it. Just do. But there's something special and something very valuable about taking time to get the knowledge, get the information, figure it out. Not everything needs to be rushed. Take your time, be patient, and you'll feel much more rewarded when you do things that way.
Yeah, I feel like if you take time, and it sounds kind of fundamental to actually ask what you really want. That's an interesting question, because, when I started a podcast, I started with a gaming headset. I was just trying to make this work, and, everyone could tell me what I should get. But the fact of the matter is, I'm just doing a podcast. I wanted to, a lot of people, like I mentioned in my last, this sometime this month, that Revive Ministries started off with just doing events at church, and it was great to have people. But I started a podcast, and everyone has an opinion. You know this, Ashero. Everyone has an opinion of what mic to use, what and all this stuff. And granted, I do sometimes end up learning that some things I do like, and they were right or they were wrong. But one thing I tried to keep, and I think that's what built me to kind of, I could tell you I want to do, and I said this even before I got married to my wife, was I'm going to do a Revive Ministry podcast the rest of my life until someone I pass it on. I don't want this to kind of end, because I knew what was next. And it wasn't something, for me, it's more cathartic, but also it's something that I feel has helped me. But also so I took the time to understand what Revive Ministry Podcast was for me. So when people said, oh, you need this camera, I'm like, no, I don't, because I know what I need. I need more space. A lot of things when it comes to my podcast and everything I do is having my own digital space when it comes to storage. My thing is, like, I don't trust things like the cloud as much, and that's just preference based, but it does make things so I know what I want, just like you mentioned with the car. And I feel that helps at least steer. And we're talking about tangible things that you can actually touch and stuff, but when it comes to choices whether to stay in a relationship that's broken or not, who's gonna make the decision? Is it gonna be you, or is it gonna be your neighbor who says you got beat it, bozo, or whatever? It really has to come from you, because you'll be around people, and whether you're like, oh, you should not be with that person. Well, I'm like, well, that conversation needs to be with that spouse or whoever you're with. Conversation starts there. Everyone may have opinions, but to decide what's next has to come from you, is basically my point.
Yeah.
Shara, we're going to take a little pause in the sense that you're a new guest. I like to kind of give you a moment to share what you've been up to. Tell a little bit about yourself to those who are listening, whatever you feel comfortable about. And,
sure.
And you can plug away. I'll put it in the notes.
I'll throw a couple plugs in there.
Okay.
So I am originally from the Washington D.C. area, just outside of Washington D.C. in Silver Spring, Maryland. That's where I was born and raised. I moved down to Florida. It's going to be 2023. It's going to be 9 years in December that I've been down here. It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but it's we're already almost in double digits for the amount of time that I've been down here in Florida. It's crazy. I moved down here for school. I went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University to study piloting. So I do have my pilot's license. And I wanted to go into a career in aviation. Due to some certain circumstances with COVID and things like that, I was working in the aviation field, and then COVID came. I got furloughed. And so I actually made a career shift, and now I work in healthcare. And so I work for a hospital, and I manage a neurosurgery practice, which is a lot of fun. It keeps me very busy. But it's really great. I really enjoy what I do. I'm learning something new every day, kind of like what we were just talking about. I feel like the person I was yesterday is different from the person I am today, because I'm learning so much in that field every single day. I also love to sing. I'm part of a singing group called One Accord. We do have a single out on Spotify. Here comes plug number one. We do have a single out on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you can get music. If you type in One Accord, you should find. I know there's a few out there, but you'll find us. Title of our single is "It Is Well" with my soul. So feel free to check it out, give it a listen. As you mentioned at the very beginning, I'm also a fellow podcaster. I have a podcast with myself, Omar Garcia, and Sebastian Lopez. It's called the Crossroads. And here's plug number 2. You can find that podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Castbox, wherever you get podcasts, wherever you're listening to this podcast, you can find that podcast. So just put in the Crossroads podcast, and it'll come up. We just started recording episodes at the beginning of this year. And so it's a lot of fun. We just have a lot of, conversations. We like to talk about the intersection between faith and life. And so we just talk about, different things that we deal with in life and how that relates to our faith. And so, definitely encourage everyone to go check that out as well. I'm into sports, huge football guy. Football is my thing.
And the pastor we will not name likes a terrible team. We'll just say that.
A pastor that will go nameless, like that we both detest. So we have something in common, me and you, Robert. We do not like the team that he roots for.
No.
We're all bitter rivals, but
yeah, I listened to your Crossroads, and I do recommend that. It's just a lot of times you don't have that conversation. People are either faith-based or they're not, and they're like, well, these people are weird. And some of them are. No, but the fact of the matter is, I just like that you make it the human side of it, because a lot of times, at the end of the day, I one comedian to ask, that was kind of funny. It was John Mulaney, I believe, or something. He said, people ask me, why did you go to church? And then he's like, well, because my parents brought me. Basically, that's like, I wasn't making choices back then. It's not like
no choice.
No. Like, so I thought it was, it's good to, a lot of times we look at things as extremes. I know living mostly secular, a lot of times people will look at, church people are all. No, not really. No, not at all, really. Sometimes, unfortunately, you have those outliers, and then and mostly, and I don't know if you agree with me, Ashero, but a lot of times it's just really people who've been hurt and maybe going to the church for wrong reasons. I'm just speculating, but a lot of times, I feel in faith-based, when it's done, correctly with the person, it's something that you are drawn to, not because of this, that, or that, because it becomes more of a calling per se to go to church. There's so many million reasons not to, for some people, but there's also, the old saying, there's so many reasons you may get hurt, or there's so many reasons not to, but then but I'm going to do it anyway. Those Western stuff, like, we shouldn't go in here, but we're going to go anyway. But
do
at
it
the
anyway.
same time, I just quickly, I remember when I first went to the church, I didn't listen to any sermons. I was coming back to Florida, living with my father. I was just trying to, get restarted in Florida, and my dad's like, "You want to go to church on Wednesday?" I'm like, "Sounds horrible." I thought it sounds horrible. It sounded horrible to me. And I remember going to church, and they got me in the sound, and that's why sound is so near and dear to me, because when they got me in the sound, I actually had something to do, and you know how important that is.
Yeah.
And then I said, you know what? I don't know what he's saying. I don't really get it, but I'm gonna make him people hear him. So that was my goal, just one thing. And just like we said in the beginning with Viktor Frankl, I didn't see the big picture of it. I just said, you know what? I'm going to make this person sound the best he can. And some of the music, some of the singers were actually pretty, decent. And I'm not trying to say this in a conceited way, but I was more just so taken aback because I just thought, church, weird people, I don't want to be a part of it. Eventually, when you be a part of something, you begin to see that it's not those outliers that we like to lend to.
Right.
But I want to appreciate you just sharing a little bit, and those plugs will be right underneath. Click them, check them out, check the podcast out. I did listen to a few of them, and I just thought it's great dialogue. It's good to have that kind of open space to kind of share, and I do really like what you guys are doing there.
I appreciate it.
Unfinished, going back to our topic, unfinished our journey in lives in any given moment. I think this has helped me personally, because when I forego the finish part, I can actually do what's in front of me. So I want to throw another quote at you and share as we stumble through. Thomas Lloyd Quayle says, every answer can be followed by another question. I know with deep people or deep conversations, never do I end up with a conclusion with an answer, something especially less tangible, where I'm like, I've got it, eureka, it's done. Like, I may get some insight, but I don't know. What are your takes when you hear this quote?
So this reminds me of when I was a child. And I'm pretty sure most people can kind of relate to this. You ask your parents a question, they give you an answer, And then the follow-up question is, but why?
Yes.
And then they give you an answer, but why?
Mm-hmm.
And why? And why? And why? And I think that is, we're talking about growth and the journey that we're all on as human beings, and constantly seeking out more information, more knowledge, constantly asking questions. No one on earth knows everything. No one knows everything. Therefore, there are always questions to be asked.
Yeah.
And when you ask a question and you get an answer, it's going to lead to another question, which is appropriate and good. You want to be inquisitive. You want to learn more, gain more knowledge. Talking about mental health, if there's something that is bothering you, get help, get information about it, and continue to seek more information and more help. Don't ever say, I'm at a point now where I'm good, I'm done, I don't need to move anymore, I'm stopping right here. Continue to push forward, continue to press forward. And I think by doing that, that's how you grow, that's how you become just a deeper human being, just more well-rounded. I think that's a really good way to become and to grow like that, is to just continue to ask questions.
I totally agree, and I think we are. Well, let me just say, some of the questions can be not just knowledge-based; could just be asking. Just having that mirror look at yourself for a moment. That's probably the hardest thing to do. I tell you that much. Sometimes you could be like, this person doesn't do that. Just complain, and a lot of times you're right. I'll just tell you, a lot of people who complain, I get it, but or they're saving the world, but not themselves. And I'm saying this not to be callous or kind of abrasive, but the point is, the question should be why. Like, one thing I always puzzled me, and we mentioned church before, is why do you go to church? And like, some people are like, well, you have to. Why do you have to? And it goes, these questions continue. So, but the point is, go deeper. I think Pastor Bob said that. Go deeper. Whether I'm thinking in life, I think this is where the human and the humility and the pride, because it shows how much you don't know. And I know you went avionics. At least when you're Embry Riddle, I don't know who your favorite teacher or professor was, but my favorite was in university was the ones who were able to balance what they did know and not know, and they admitted how much they didn't know, and they were just inspiring. Because but it was just like I was drawn to it, so that was very much the case. I want to, you kind of touched on this as we kind of wrap things up. The theme is discover what is next, and like you've alluded, during COVID, a lot of changes for you. A lot of changes for me. We're the 2020 married couples of the world, but at the same time, what was helpful for you to decide what is next for you? I remember I felt it was so drastic for me. My wife was in Korea. Oh, well, she wasn't my wife then, but I was just like, get back, COVID's here, and I was like, all this stuff. But at the same time, I had to make that choice. It was a bold choice. No one knew how long it was going to be, and what has not been helpful. I'm just giving you illustrations from my context. What was helpful for you deciding what was next and what was not?
So for me, just taking time, being patient, has been very helpful. When I got furloughed from my job, I took a week and I said, you know what, I'm gonna treat this as like a mini vacation for myself. I'm just gonna take a week, and just, I'm not gonna stress about it. I'm not gonna think about it. I'm just gonna take time to relax, de-stress, kind of recharge myself. And as I was doing that, without even thinking about it, I just ideas about how to move forward would just kind of pop into my head from time to time. And because I wasn't so narrow-minded and focused and stressing out about, oh man, I've been furloughed, I need to find a job right away. because I wasn't that hyper focused, I was able to have these, these kind of internal conversations with myself, and without any pressure, and just kind of, okay, well, if I do this, then what about that, and so on and so forth. And I found that just over my entire life, just being patient, just taking time to mull things over and not being hasty has really helped with what, big decisions when I have to determine, am I going to go left or am I going to go right? Things like that. It's just been very helpful. Conversely, I would say that something that has not been helpful has been, the exact opposite. Just stressing. Like I don't work well when I'm stressed, and I don't work well with people who stress out a lot or stress other people out. That just doesn't really help me. So I feel like I'm in a really good place, but I can get even better at not stressing out. It takes a lot for me to say that I'm stressed, but also just kind of putting myself in positions or places where I'm not surrounded by people who stress. That kind of helps too, because I know that if I put myself in that environment, in that situation, then it just kind of seeps into me, and then I get stressed out, and then it gets messy.
Yeah. And that's a change. That's a change of perspective. For me, I think it's just time man. I started valuing my time, which in turn made my time, I guess, management of it. The people I spend time with are the ones I want to, people. And so for me, it's certain things come in mind, like someone's emergency is not necessarily my emergency. Knowing my limits, knowing that I'm human and I want to help, but there's limits. It's humbling to know how little I can actually do. But at the same time, valuing my time has also prompted in a way people valuing my time, because I set boundaries, but I am very intentional when I'm with them. At the same time, I know I'm, settling my feet, in the field I'm in. But I think time management, I'm recognizing that, hey, my time it is valuable, and not just urgently, and on the other spectrum, in the sense that not just rushing to the next thing because I'm trying to make sure I want everyone to like me, or I won't. There's like John Mulaney, and I use him a lot, but he said in university, you lose a lot of sleep. Does everyone hate me, or should I go but to sleep? It's like, you got this, at the young age of your 20s, or you're constantly wanting to belong, whether you want to act like you don't want to belong. You do want to belong, because we're not islands. But at the same time, when you start, one thing I realized that helped me through at least COVID was time management. My time management skills got much better because I really started valuing my time. As we wrap up, there's last quote that we're going to discuss from Yulia. It doesn't matter how strong, well prepared you are if you have no direction. I think that's what we've been saying. But what are your thoughts when you hear this last quote?
Yeah, so you have to be intentional. Everything that you do has to be intentional. You can be super brilliant, super athletic, super whatever, but if you're going around aimlessly and you're not intentional about what you're doing, you're not going to really make an impact. I can kind of compare it to taking a bow and arrow, shooting an arrow, and then painting a target around the arrow to make it look like you hit a bullseye. That's not really going to accomplish much. You go to a target competition, just like what we've been discussing. Make sure you take your time, make sure you do all your research, and make sure that when you do set out to do something, that you do it to the best of your ability and you do it 100%. And you're going to make an impact that way. You're going to make a mark. If you're dealing with anything mental health related, don't say I've got this and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, and do that, and start going all over the place. Just take a second, take a breath, all right, I need help. I want to get help for this,
Mm.
and focus your energy and efforts into doing that. And you'll find that you'll be much more successful by having a goal in mind. And again, we're talking about growth as well. If you it's hard to grow if you don't know what you're trying to grow into.
Yeah.
Like trees or plants in general, they're always aiming, trying to find the sun. So, they're growing. You don't see plants growing and aiming their branches or leaves towards the ground. They're aiming towards the sun. They've got a goal in mind. And so we've got to be the same way. Just make sure that we have a goal, a destination that we're trying to reach, and understand that it's not guaranteed that we're ever going to get to the finish line, but that's what we're striving towards, and just be intentional about making moves to get to that point.
Yeah, and I do feel spending that time, that self-talk, and just at the very least, if you're able to pause, like you've mentioned and I've mentioned, it prevents you from responding, if that makes sense. Being responsive, sometimes, especially when you're in the thick of it, when you're anxious, when you're stressed out, can be, we sometimes don't, a lot of times don't make the best decisions. A lot of times we're overwhelmed, stuff of that sort. So I do appreciate what you're saying, especially when it comes to our management of ourselves, and also understanding that we're changing. And in that sense, there's, I think understanding that and knowing what you really want to go for is, I feel, a self-talk that's more valuable than getting it than just urgently wanting to respond correctly. The rightness that we sometimes think is more important, whether you're faith-based or not. I'm right here. Well, you're right, but you haven't slept. You haven't taken care of yourself. You haven't eaten anything right. But I'm doing all this stuff. But how about you? When does you come into the picture? Sometimes it doesn't, and that's when I think about the idea of discovering what's next, it's not discovering what's next that people tell me. It's discovering what's next for you, whatever that is. If you're married, I would say, those love songs. I would say, really, it's your team. You have pluses and minuses. Not that you're absorbed by the individual. You are actually just a team. I have pluses and minuses that my wife Joanne has pluses and minuses, but at the same time, it's nice to have that partnership, and it becomes more effective when you can communicate that. I have a bad day. I made a mistake. When everything is not about completion, 100% like a game, then it becomes real. You're like, man, I just screwed up. I messed up this. I bought this. I shouldn't have bought this. And you know what? We're human. And I think that is a good place to start as. And as we wrap up, final thoughts as we wrap up. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would just say, don't be stagnant. Continue to move forward, continue to grow. With everything that you do, just be intentional about moving the ball forward, even if it's an inch. Don't feel like you have to conquer the world all in one day. One of a saying that one of my bosses always says, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You just be steady, be consistent. You don't need to win the marathon in 5 minutes. If you need to take 5 hours, 5 months, 5 years, 5 decades, so be it. Just continue to move forward. Don't be stagnant.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you for being a part of this conversation. And also, I want to just mention when it comes to discovering what is next, I guess for me, it's just get to know you. Take the time to get to know you. I think um, you'll begin to formulate, these goals that you may want to achieve, but the process is becoming something better. When you actually start, I always had a problem with the whole like, I want to be healthy. Well, ask the question, why do you want to be healthy? No, it's not just because someone told me to be healthy. It has to be more. From what I discovered, especially working in the mental health field, a lot of times substance use is it overlaps. No one really is very successful, and all their goal is to not to drink. Sometimes that is part of it, but it's not everything. It can't just be I'm not going to drink today. It has to be like it progresses, become something better. We're not standing, like I said, waters don't do well when they don't flow. They have
Right.
moving water is a good illustration of that. But again, thank you for joining
Oh, absolutely.
us, Ashero. It was really great to have other insight, ever perspective. If you are listening to this and you feel like you would like to be a guest, just email me on reviveministriesfl.com. It's info@reviveministriesfl.com. Just email us. Obviously, you can find it on the website. Check that out. Everything's linked together, all the audio on there, and also on YouTube, of course. This is goodbye from Revive Ministry Podcast, leaving you with this last quote, from Martin Luther King. He says, "If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, keep moving forward."